Chapter 18. I stood at the water pump scrubbing my body. It was bitterly cold out, but I didn't care. I would scrub my body, I decided, each and every morning, no matter how cold it was, no matter how tired I was alive, and I meant to stay that way. We had no soap, but at least I was able to wash away the caking dirt of Birkenau. I paid careful attention to where I'd been tattooed. Too many others had let their tattoos get infected, and that had taken them to the camp surgeon. You didn't want to go to the camp surgeon. Ever. I even rubbed my teeth with my wet fingers. We had no toothbrushes or toothpaste, of course, but it felt important to remember what it was like to be a human. As I scrubbed the taint of Birkenau from my body, I read the signs the Nazis had posted above the water pump. The block is your home. Maintain cleanliness. And one louse, your death. Big jokers, the Nazis. You could play by the rules, keep yourself clean, do everything right, and still the Nazis would kill you for looking at them wrong. But I played the game. Work at Birkenau was as bad as everywhere else. Here, as in Plassau, we were to build new barracks. The ground for the new section was so big, it would double the size of the camp when it was finished. The Nazis called the new camp B-3, but we prisoners called it Mexico. I don't know where the name started, but Mexico always sounded exotic to me, warm and sunny, with beaches and laughing faces. Maybe that's why the prisoners nicknamed it Mexico, to make them think of something very different from what B-3 really was. The camp storehouse, where the Nazis kept all the valuables the Jews from the towns and villages brought with them when they first arrived. We called that Canada. Food was weak coffee substitute in the morning, watery soup at lunch, and bread at night. The bread was hard and tasteless and had to serve as breakfast as well. The soup was tepid. Guys, tepid means not really warm, but not really cold, just kind of room temperature. And you were lucky if there was a limp potato floating in it. I learned a trick with the soup, which was to wait a while before lining up for it. The heavier parts of the soup sank to the bottom. If you were among the last in line, your soup was thicker. I almost always got some chunk in my soup by holding back until the end. Just that little bit of extra food might keep me from becoming a Mussulman. We were forbidden to go out at night. So instead of camp latrines, we had to use a barrel in the barrack if we had to go to the bathroom. There were 2 barrels for 500 people, so we learned to go to the latrines during the day as much as we could. There was 1 latrine per prison block, really just a row of holes cut in boards that set over a cesspit. Prisoners stood guard at the door with clocks. Their job was to make sure no prisoner spent more than 2 minutes in the latrine. If you took longer than that, an SS guard would go in and beat you with a club until you left. There was to be no dawdling at Birkenau, and dawdling means wasting of time. The joke was on the Germans, this time though. By leaving the same prisoners stationed at the latrine, the one place we all had to go throughout the day, they gave us a secret postman. The Nazis never wanted us to talk to one another, but if you ever had a message for someone else, you could whisper it to the prisoner on watch at the latrine door as you went in. He would remember it and quietly whisper it to the recipient when he came to take care of his business later that day. One day, as I went into the latrine with another prisoner, I heard the watchman whisper, "Tonight." I didn't know what the message meant, but it wasn't for me anyway. That night, I was fast asleep on my shelf, slotted in with all the other prisoners in my barrack, when shouts startled me out of my sleep. Capos and SS guards were in the barracks, yelling at us to get up and smacking at prisoners with their clubs. I blinked, disoriented and scared, but I managed to tumble off my shelf. This was something new for Birkenau, where usually they let us at least sleep through the night. We quickly assembled in the yard, standing in rows, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. The floodlights in the towers weren't sliding lazily over the grounds like usual. They were turned outside, and they swept the woods quickly back and forth. Guard dogs barked beyond the barbed wire fence surrounding the camp. and cars and tanks rolled up by outside. Prison break, a man next to me whispered. A prison break? Who? How? My heart thumped in my chest. I wished I was with them, whoever they were, running for the forest, the hills, anywhere but here. Get out, I prayed for them. Get away. Fly. A Nazi came around, checking our numbers against a clipboard. There were always prisoners who couldn't get out of bed again, who had become Muslimaners. That's what the Nazis wanted anyway, to kill us with work and starvation. But which of the missing prisoners were dying back in the barracks, and which of them were running free in the woods? The Nazis grabbed my hand and read the number on my arm, then moved on to the next prisoner. My wrist still hurt where he grabbed me. His grip was so tight. The Nazis were mad. Prisoners weren't supposed to stand up for themselves. Prisoners weren't supposed to escape. Will they make it out? Well, where will they go if they do? Could I escape from Birkenau too? I wondered. Could I live in the woods eating berries and nuts, sleeping out in the cold? Couldn't be worse than the camps, and maybe not every Pole was like that awful boys throwing snowballs at the train station. Maybe some sympathetic Pole would take me in, hide me in their barn. We stood for hours, late into the night. They even went through the roll call again, as though some of us might have slipped off in between, which didn't seem possible. Then, almost at dawn, there were shouts of excitement from the Nazis beyond the fence. The gates were opened, and a ragged bunch of prisoners were marched back inside, all beaten and bloodied. I immediately felt sick to my stomach and swayed on my feet. The escaped prisoners hadn't made it. They'd been caught. How? I didn't know. And how many had run and how many they'd caught, I didn't know either. But these men hadn't made it, and the price would be severe. The SS officer of the watch sneered at us. There is no escape from Birkenau, he cried. No escape. Perhaps some of you are thinking about running, but no, there is no one waiting to help you on the outside. There is nowhere for you to hide. You will be caught. And here is what we do to those who try to escape. They lined the men up against a wall in the assembly yard. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The watch officer gunned them down himself, riddling their bodies with bullets. Bring forward their work detail, the guard cried. Other men were pulled out of the ranks, prisoners who had done nothing but work alongside the men who'd run, prisoners who hadn't tried to escape. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The SS man shot them too. Then the soldier turned the gun on us at roll call ranks. Rat-a-tat-tat. I closed my eyes and prayed the bullets wouldn't find me, trembling as prisoners were hit and fell dead to the ground all around me. I couldn't move, though. I couldn't run. If I flinched, I would be singled out and shot. This is the punishment for escape. All of you will share the blame, the watch officer yelled. He shot until the machine gun ran out of bullets. Click, click, click. The SS officer threw his weapon to the ground. Clean up this mess, he ordered, as he marched away, leaving us to carry away our own dead. That night, in what little sleep time there was left, I dreamed that Amon-Goth was chasing me with his dogs. I ran and ran and ran, but I could never quite get away. Then one of the dogs leapt and bit my left arm. I woke up screaming and holding my burning left arm, where the Nazis had carved B-3087 into my skin. All right, guys, let's look at some of the discussion pictures. Right here is a concentration camp water pump, the only source of water for the prisoners. Look at it. It's all in the mud. Look what they're drinking out of. They might have their own bowls. Left a sign at the camp that translates as one louse, your death. Lice is the plural of louse. We were to build new barracks. The Nazis called the new camp B3, but we called it Mexico. So these are the newest barracks that were built at Auschwitz, where they slept, lived. Okay, this is a picture of Canada. This is a storehouse where the Nazis kept valuables. Jews brought them when they first arrived, and we called it Canada. I remember an interview, that I saw somewhere where one of the former Nazi soldiers in his testimony told about all the all the jewelry and the money and the nice clothes and the nice shoes, because remember, some of these Jews were wealthy that were brought here, and they all weren't like Yannick. They all weren't from Poland, where they lived in ghettos for years. Some of them were brought straight from countries that were captured to the concentration camps. They didn't live in ghettos, so they still had nice clothes and nice shoes and nice things, the wealthier ones. And their jewelry and all that stuff, they took them to this Canada. And the Nazi soldiers who took care of it were supposed to log it all in and keep track of it, but some of them took a lot of the stuff for themselves. And the guy was talking about in the interview that I watched all the different types of money from all over the world, the different denominations of money that were there from the Jews that came from different places in Europe. And here is this is from an actual, um, there are pictures of this display in the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., but this actually exists at the Auschwitz Museum. And these are shoes taken from victims. They're pals. They're behind a plexiglass. And when you walk into there, you can smell the leather smell, because remember, back then, you didn't go to Walmart and just buy shoes off the shelf. Shoes were leather shoes, and they were handmade, and they were made specifically for each person. So they were very different than shoes that you might wear today. Much of them were. And here's a picture of the indoor latrines um, that you could only be used by the prisoners during the daytime. Now at Auschwitz, they had, if you want to call them nicer latrines than they did at the other concentration camps, because Auschwitz had been a Polish military camp that the Nazis, of course, had taken over, and they built onto and re-outfitted it for what they were doing. And there's a big long urinal over there too, I believe. And this is the towers that they were talking about. We saw pictures of where the lights spun. But guys, this fence right here, all of these little, you see the wire, but you see all these little dark out outshoots from the posts. Those are insulators. Those mean electricity. So this was electric fence. And over the years, you see some of the wires are cut, but they were electrified, and they were electrified enough to kill someone. And this is a wall in the assembly yard that was used for executions. And the flowers are from the modern day visitors, the people that come to Auschwitz to leave memorials for those who died. But this is where they stood prisoners and shot them in cold blood.